Okay. Good morning to all of you who are joining us now. My name is Jim Gilmartin. I'm with the ECCL, and welcome to the 196th meeting of the ECCL. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate your time and interest. We are accepting questions during the course of today's program, and at the end of each speaker's comments, I will ask if there are any questions and try to get as many as possible answered. We are also recording the meetings, and you'll be notified when it is available on the ECCL website. So I'd like to turn it over to Mark for a moment. Mark?
Yes, let's take it a moment of silence in remembrance of all those affected by COVID-19 and the 9/11 tragedy. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. Okay, so let me introduce the panelists today. This month, our guest speakers are Chief Scott Vanderbrook of Estero Fire and Rescue and Ruth Watkins of Calusa Waterkeeper. And obviously, also joining us today is Mark Nowitzki, our Chief Operating Officer. Let me begin by introducing the Chief. Chief Vanderbrook has been in the fire rescue for over 33 years. And the fire chief of Estero for the past 12 years. In November of '98, he was hired by the Estero Fire and Rescue to assist in the development and growth of a young organization. And in September of 2008, the Board of Commissioners unanimously appointed Scott Vanderbrook to the position of fire chief. Scott, you're on.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, as Mark mentioned, I'd like everybody to remember not only the fire, police, and EMS, but everybody that lost their lives on 9/11. Those are pretty special days to us being in the public service. So please remember that throughout the day and throughout the year. A couple things that I haven't met with you guys in quite a while that I want to discuss was, first was our budget. Our millage rate this year will remain at a 2.13. It's remained steady at that for the last 3-4 years. Some of the concerns that we saw this year, though, were we only received about a 3.3% increase in property values. That is actually down over the last couple of years. If you drive around outside of Estero Fire Rescue or outside of the village of Estero, there's an explosive growth in communities around us. I believe San Carlos received about an 8% increase in property values. So we're not sure if this is just because there's not a lot of development going on inside the village right now. We have steady development going on out east with the place and with the new development that has broken ground. We're not sure if these are COVID numbers or it's just there's been some pullbacks on the commercials and the properties in the village, waiting to see what's going to happen with our economy. So we're going to watch these numbers and we'll really get a better understanding of June 1st of next year of what the property values will be, because this year when we got our property values, they were January 1st property values before COVID ever hit. So we'll watch over the next year and see how that affects our budget. And we hope that some more growth comes with inside the village. With that being said, with the growth going on out east, we are moving forward with building Station 45. We have hired an architect and an engineer, and they will start work on October 1st. Shortly after that, we will hire a contract management company. And soon after that, hopefully in the summer of next year or fall of next year, we will actually hire a construction company to start moving forward with that station. One of the stipulations with the Camerata group that donated the 5 acres to the fire department and donated to Lee County EMS is that when that second subdivision gets up and running, when people start to live there, there needs to be ALS transport and fire services out there. So we are moving forward with that. And I believe the people out east, they pay the same millage rate as the ones in the village. I believe they need the same fire service that you guys are afforded in the village. Our response times right now can range from 11 to 12 minutes out east, where in the village we're 4 to 5 minutes. So we're looking forward to expanding our services, hiring people, building a new fire station to service those needs out east. Flu shots. Everybody's asked a lot about flu shots. Things are going to be a little bit different this year with COVID. You're not going to be able to stop by our fire station or come to our administrative building and get flu shots. What we are doing is we're going to have drive-through flu shots. Once we get those dates and times set up, we'll get that out to the ECCL, our webpage, and we'll have set up times, just kind of like the COVID tested at the CenturyLink. but we'll have drive-through spots for the flu shots. That'll limit exposure to our firefighters and a limit the exposure of our people getting the flu shots to other people gathering. We will set up still some community flu shots, but they will also be drive-through. So like if your community contacts Susan and says, we got a guaranteed 40 people that need them, we can set a day and time them up at your clubhouse or someplace. We'll set up a tent and we'll do a drive-through. We won't come inside the building or inside your residence to do that. One of the other things that's been a little bit sad for us is that for over 20 years, we've had a really unique smoke detector program where other fire departments around us don't do that. We come out, change your smoke detectors, change your batteries. We've been doing that for a long time. Because of COVID-19, we've had to discontinue that program. We just can't allow our firefighters to be exposed in numerous homes throughout the day when it's not warranted at this time as we move forward. We're not sure how that program will look in the future. We've had to cancel a lot of our public education programs with the kids, which is kind of devastating to me and me having a child, but our world has changed and we're just going to have to figure out how we're going to be able to handle those things as we move forward. We're trying to keep the least exposure as possible to our firefighters and have them just run the emergency calls that they need. With that being said, COVID-19, we still see a lot of pandemic calls within our community, mainly in our adult living facilities or nursing homes, but there still are a few out there. But you can tell by the Lee County numbers, they're down drastically with the hospital admissions and the people in the ICU. So I think we're heading in the right direction. It's just a matter to see what happens again when the flu season comes around and if it spikes again. COVID-19 has cost Estero Fire Rescue $30,000 in operating, and that's anywhere from additional supplies, testing, just things that we wouldn't normally have. But one good thing with the $30,000 is that we've been able to apply for a grant to be reimbursed for those funds. So we're hoping that, over time, we'll get reimbursed for those funds just like we do for hurricane disasters and everything. So that's kind of my basic wrap up. And if anybody has any questions of Estero Fire Rescue, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, Chief, let's see. Anybody out there that has any questions for the Chief, you can ask them. On your screen, you should see a Q&A link, and you can just hit that, and I'll open up your mic, and you'll be able to ask the Chief any questions. Any interest at this point? Okay, Chief, I guess you covered what's on their mind, so.
If anybody has an individual questions that they don't want to ask over the Zoom or something like that, you can reach out to Susan Lindenmuth or myself, and we're very open and very transparent with the public. So if you have anything, thank you very much, and thanks for having me on this morning.
Thanks, Chief. We appreciate you coming on board. Thanks very, very much. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is introduce our next speaker. That's Ruth Watkins. Ruth is currently the president of the Calusa Waterkeeper and has over 30 years experience working for water quality focused environmental organizations in the Pacific Northwest. Ruth spent much of her time coordinating with agencies, local governments, and diverse groups to undertake multifaceted projects to protect vulnerable water resources. So Ruth, you're on. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. And thanks everybody for inviting me to be here today. I'm glad to speak to you. I do believe I gave a presentation pre-pandemic to the group. It was live in person, actually. We can all remember what those were like. And I'm going to cover a little bit of the same information that I talked about last time, but also some newer data and I'm open to talking about other issues besides the one I'm going to talk about this morning. We can delve into other types of water quality issues. But Calusa Waterkeeper is a 501c3 nonprofit, so we're a tax-exempt organization through the IRS. We are a member organization of the International Waterkeeper Alliance, and our area of what we call our jurisdiction, the area that we work in, is from Lake Okeechobee, covering, and then the Caloosahatchee River down to the coastal waters, and also Estero Bay and all the tributaries going to Estero Bay. And we touch on parts then of Lee County, some Charlotte County, Hendry, and Glades County is part of the area that we work in. So, but obviously today I'm going to talk about Estero Bay. The Estero Bay watershed is 193,000 acres. And the really wonderful thing about Estero Bay is that, and most of you may know this, is that it was the first state aquatic preserve established in Florida. And that was in 1966. And that was a really big deal. That was a really pretty big deal to be the first aquatic preserve in the state. 20 years later, the Estero Bay was designated as an outstanding Florida waterway. And why that's important is that outstanding Florida waterways get extra special protection from the state. So there are some activities, some on-the-land activities that can't happen that would increase pollution in an outstanding Florida waterway because they're supposed to be specially protected. So that designation occurred for Estero Bay in 1986, and then 4 years later in 1990, all the tributaries to Estero Bay were also designated as outstanding Florida waterways. That was 30 years ago, actually 30 years ago this fall. So, so that was pretty special and pretty strong statement by the state that they were going to take extra measures to protect the water quality in both the bay and the tributaries. So what is, I'm sad to report, and I'm sure if you've read any water quality news in the papers over the years, that despite all this extra protection, the state has now come to the conclusion in 2019 that Estero Bay is officially what they call verified impaired for nutrient pollution. And what verified impaired means, that's the official word that the state uses and the state water quality standards use, that verified impaired. But what that means is, after collecting 20 years of data, the data consistently, the numbers consistently show that the level of nutrients in the bay is way above the standard for nutrients, the threshold for nutrients. So it is contaminated by nutrients, essentially. And that designation, that bad designation happened in 2019, that the bay is verified impaired for nutrients. And all of the tributaries to the bay have been verified impaired for either nutrients or bacteria, fecal bacteria, and some of the tributaries are actually impaired for both nutrients and fecal bacteria. So what started out as a wonderful picture of these waterways being extra specially protected has now got us into a situation where the waterways are having problems. There are problems in the water. This morning I'm going to focus on one of those, which is a fecal indicator bacteria, which basically means that when a water body has high readings of fecal indicator bacteria, it indicates that there's fecal matter in the water. So we're going to take a look at 5 of the tributaries to the bay where Lee County has been sampling monthly for 20 years. And we're going to go through the data here in a few minutes, and I'm going to show you the extreme level in some cases where there's fecal bacteria, fecal matter in the waters. And it isn't just a water quality concern. As you might imagine, if there's fecal matter in the water, it's also very much a public health concern. So that people that either are on the water and can either ingest the water, and I'm not talking about taking big gulps of it, but they somehow get water in their mouths, or they are, down submerged in the water, they can be exposed to the bacteria and they can become, have gastrointestinal problems, skin rashes, eye irritations, any number of symptoms of being in touch with this bacteria. you can't see it. You can't see this bacteria in the water. So that's a problem. Whereas when we have, say, red tide or the blue-green algae, you can certainly see, either in the case of the blue-green algae, you can definitely see it. In the case of red tide, you can certainly see the effects of it with the dead fish and so forth. But with the fecal indicator bacteria, you can't see it in the water. And another problem with it is that there's very little signage that's being posted, either by the state or by the county or by anybody, warning folks that there are very high levels of fecal matter in a body of water. Like, don't swim here, for instance, would be probably a pretty good sign to put up in some of these areas. So keep in mind when we're talking about some of these numbers, that the higher the number is, the higher the chances are that people who are in the water and get water either in their mouth or get submerged as they're swimming and get a lot of their body in the water, they are more likely to get sick. So the two numbers, before we get into some of the data, the two numbers that I want you to keep in mind is one of them is 70, and these numbers are colonies per 100 milliliters, but you don't have to worry about that part. I want you to just remember two numbers. One is 70. So 70 of the colonies per 100 milliliters is the State Department of Health level, where anything above 70 is an unsafe level at coastal beaches and requires that a beach advisory be posted. 70. The other number I want you to remember is 130. Still, this is colonies per 100 milliliters, same parameter. 130 is the federal threshold that signifies that there's a significant health risk to recreational users in this water body. So 70 and 130. So I'm just going to run through, I'm not going to go through, it's really hard to go through a whole bunch of numbers as we're just here talking. But I just want to give you some idea. I've got five of the waterways. So in Hendry Creek, there have been 8 sites that have been sampled by Lee County. All of these are sampled by Lee County, and then the data is submitted to the state of Florida for inclusion in the state of Florida's water quality data bank. So that's where the data comes from. And the testing started in September of 2001. So it's basically just shy of 20 years of data. And I'm going to give you the averages to start with. The average, so the average of the lowest readings and the highest readings, and again, remember 70 and 130, the averages range from 21, 93, 300, 244, 661, 840, 591, and 1,608. And those were just the averages. So we have maximums in these 8 Hendry Creek sites that are over 3,000. One of the sites, Hendry Creek at Gladiolus, is 9,200, had a high reading of that. And there are other readings that are well in the 2,000s and 3,000s, and another one over 8,000. So that's Hendry Creek. Moolock Creek has 4 sites that have been, 2 of them have been tested since 2001, the other one since 2003. And the averages there, again, keeping in mind the 70 and the 130, the average, 336, 615, 37, which that's pretty good, and 58. And again, the maximums are in the thousands. The highest maximum in the Moolock Creek data bank was 4,040. Estero River. The Estero River has 5 sites that the county has been monitoring, all of them since 2001. And the average in the Estero River, 363, 599, 81, 122, and 216, with the maximums ranging, most of them well over 2,500. With one site at Halfway Creek at 41, the maximum there was 4,840. Spring Creek, 5 sites since 2001, and the median, the average there, 412, 369, 217, 203, and 229, with the maximums well over 3,000. And lastly, the Imperial River. There are seven sites on the Imperial River that have been monitored. 4 of them have been monitored since 2001. The other couple of ones were added in 2003. These are all of these are monthly, based on monthly sampling. The averages were 40, 387, 715, 1,128, 131, 383, and 99. So, okay, so what does that all mean? We have lots of data, we have lots of numbers. That just tells us that there are obviously extremely high levels of fecal matter in these waterways. But what's important is, the critical thing is that what it doesn't tell us, these numbers don't tell us where it's coming from. They only tell us that it's there. So unfortunately, that means more testing needs to be done, more money needs to be spent to identify, and there are tests that do this. Unfortunately, they're much more expensive than just going out and measuring the fecal matter in a tributary or a river. It involves a complex process to figure out whether it's from humans or whether it's from wildlife. And why that's important to know is, if we can figure out what the source is, we'll be better equipped to figure out what we can do about it. So for instance, if it's human waste, then we know, okay, we've got areas where there's a problem with septic systems, or we've perhaps got leaking wastewater treatment facilities. Our infrastructure is perhaps leaking into our waterways. So if it's wildlife, what can we do about that? Probably not much. But so it's important to understand which part of this could be human caused so that we can do something about it. So on the good news front, the village of Estero has contracted with FGCU to do a 1.5-year study to identify the sources in the Estero River and determine if it's human or animal. Also, the city of Bonita Springs has contract with FGCU. They're doing a 1-year study to identify sources of not just bacteria, but also they're looking at the sources of nutrients as well in the Imperial River and Spring Creek. So that's a really good start to understanding the source of the problem so we can hopefully address it. I also wanted to mention a really good piece of news. The city of Bonita Springs, they've built a bioreactor that they're putting stormwater runoff through it, and it's reducing the amount of nutrients, specifically nitrogen, going into the Imperial River. And they've received an environmental stewardship award from the Florida League of Cities recently for their work in reducing nutrient pollution going into the Imperial River. So that's a pretty cool thing. So I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes about what we can do, aside from getting these tests done here over the next year or so and figuring out what the sources are. And I would love if we could maybe get the folks from FGCU to come to one of these meetings and share some of the data as they're learning it, or maybe they'll share it. They would, I'm sure, share it when they're all done. I'm not sure how much data they can share while they're in the midst of a study, but when they are done, I think it would be great if they could come and share with you what they're finding. I'm sure it'll be newsworthy and important, but just important information to help us understand what we can do next. But there's some things that so the gated communities can do. In fact, I think there's some efforts at a couple of excuse me, gated communities already in this regard. But communities can put together an environmental policy for their community that just states, here are things we pledge to work toward for maybe what our community may be contributing to water quality. And I'm talking more in a general sense, not just the fecal issue. Some of the communities are now starting to establish environmental clubs where people who live in the community can learn about the issues and educate other residents and members in the community on an ongoing basis. We think it's really important for the gated communities to participate in local advocacy groups such as ECCL. We highly recommend that communities do that. Residents can also monitor the water bodies that and bodies of water that flow that their community may have an impact on. And this is something that Calusa Waterkeeper can help with. We have a large crew of volunteer monitors, some of who live in Estero and who are already doing some monitoring. But if that's of interest to any of the communities to start a small monitoring program in your part of the world, please do contact us and we can help you with that. And also the communities can prepare fact sheets where they can use to speak to elected officials and legislators, because the key to improving water quality is having good protective measures in place. And we thought we had those with the outstanding Florida waterways protections. Clearly those didn't work. So policies probably have to be strengthened in order to better protect our waterways. And so those are some things we think that the communities can get involved in. On an individual basis, it's really important, especially for the fecal bacteria matter, for people to bag their pet waste and dispose of it in the garbage. Please don't just leave it on the land, because if you leave it on the land, then the storm comes along and washes it into the closest, even if it goes into a ditch, not directly into the stream, it will eventually make its way, that bacteria will eventually make its way to the nearest creek or river. If you live on a septic tank, have it regularly inspected and maintained. And one of the really big things that we can do is to start looking at planting native vegetation. Native vegetation that's used to growing here forever and ever, is used to the soils here. So it doesn't require fertilizing. And that's huge, because when we apply fertilizer in our yards and on our plants, and we live near or on a waterway, that fertilizer easily gets washed into the waterway when it rains, or even when you water your lawn. That water carries the fertilizer into the waterway, and that increases the level of phosphorus and nitrogen, which means it becomes a problem nutrient-wise. So we're highly recommending people really look into ways where they can do that. Before I go to questions, I just want to, and I hope you don't mind, I'm going to make just a very small plug for a film that Calusa Waterkeeper is putting together right now. We're finalizing it into a rough cut, and we're going to be showing it in an online event on Saturday, November the 14th. That's going to be the premiere showing of it. We will make the film available after the premiere to other groups who want to show it in their communities and so forth, but the premiere of it is going to be on November the 14th. And I can get you that information of how you can log into that. I just want to warn you ahead of time that it is our annual fundraising event. So I would love you to see the film, but that's only going to be a portion. The whole evening is going to be about an hour and 15 minutes long, our event. And some of that will be raising funds because we weren't able to do, like a lot of groups, our annual fundraiser in person this year. So we're needing to do it online, but we will be showing the film in the middle of that. So if you're interested in seeing it, we're going to be talking about the bay, the tributaries, how wonderful they are, and how much they need our help. So, that's that. I hope I didn't take too long. And I would be glad to take some questions. Apparently there were a couple of questions that did come in. So Jim, if there's time, I could go through these.
Yes, why don't you do that?
Okay, so these are a different issue than what I was talking about, but that's fine, and that's great. One of them is, given the fact that we have been experiencing toxic blooms of red and blue-green algae for many years, and many organizations and agencies have expressed their concerns about this phenomena, why have we still seen no improvement in these algae outbreaks? What can be done to achieve a positive and lasting impact? Well, that's probably a 2-hour discussion, but I will keep it short. The reason we have the blooms is because of the high level of nutrients in the system. And the nutrients come from an array of sources. And those sources are not being reduced. And so we have to get a handle on the sources of the problem, because the problem isn't going to just go away by with one single thing or one new law. We have to address stormwater, nutrients from stormwater runoff, urban development, agriculture, sewer systems, septic systems. There's an array of sources of the nutrients that are going in to Lake Okeechobee, our rivers, our streams, and our bay, and we have to address that. And that is a huge move, because a lot of that is, quite frankly, gets to be pretty political when we start talking about how do we control urban development? How do we regulate runoff coming from agriculture? It takes some courageous moves to make very big changes like that. But that in the end is what we need to have happen in order to reduce the problem of too many nutrients in the system, which is feeding these blooms and making them proliferate. When the temperature gets right in the water and in the air, and then you add all these wonderful, great, huge amounts of nutrients to it, then what you get is the blooms. The second question is, strong scientific proof exists that blue-green algae give rise to cyanobacteria, which can give rise to the environmental toxin beta-methylamino L-alanine, or BMAA. I'm just going to call it BMAA, both in the water and the air. High concentrations of blue-green algae have caused hotspots for ALS, and that BMAA can be linked to Alzheimer's disease. Why have local authorities in Southwest Florida been so slow to communicate this finding to the public? Well, our organization has not been slow to report those findings to the public, but I'm not sure I can speak for local authorities. I do think that there are some public health, there is public health research being conducted now that is continuing to really strengthen the case for the link between the cyanobacteria and BMAA and very significant neurological diseases. And those results so far are, maybe some of them aren't all universally accepted. So the research is continuing to try to nail down that link without any question. So there's one thing that's still going on. The other problem is that currently cyanobacteria is not a registered pollutant. In all of the US, there is nowhere where cyanobacteria is regulated. So it's not even recognized as a pollutant. So if you have something that's not recognized by the authorities as a problem, as a contaminant, there's no, it's harder to pass a law to address it and to try to take care of it, to try to do something about it. So our organization has petitioned the state of Florida to make cyanobacteria a registered pollutant in the state. And apparently there's also a move in South Carolina to do the same thing. And they're apparently a little further along in that process. They're getting very close to being the first state in the nation to actually say cyanobacteria is a contaminant and a problem, and we have to address it. And we're hoping, our organization is hoping, that we can get that to happen here in Florida, because once it's registered as a contaminant, I think local authorities, any authority, would be hard pressed to ignore it at that point. So that's maybe not the answer you were looking for, but that's just my off-the-cuff response to it this morning. So
Okay, thanks very much, Ruth. I believe there was a participant that raised their hand.
okay.
Donna, was that you? If so, would you mind doing it again? And we'll get a question. No, I'm afraid not.
Okay.
Yes, here she is. Here she is.
Good.
Let me find her. Donna, just give me a second. Just give me a second here. Donna Sutton. Okay, Donna, you can talk. Donna?
Okay, now, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, hi. When I was in Arizona, we had the Prescott Creek, and there was a whole group that was looking at the Prescott Creek and trying to find the non-point source contamination, and we took pictures and tracked it all the way down. Has the Calusa Waterkeepers done any of that for any, I mean, you're doing samples in like 7 places, 8 places, so I think that you have in different points. But has anybody gone through and say gone from where it starts and kind of looked at each place along the tributaries and through the rivers on where there were animals such as cows that were close by? Where is there a parking lot that's draining into that tributary that could be a source of contamination, and kind of marked it all the way down?
So would it be like an aerial, aerial, or just photos on the ground, or what did you all do?
We did photos on the ground. Like, okay. I had gone up to the mountain to try. I was up on the top where it starts way up there. And like, we found a dump site with tires that were right on the river, you know, and so on one of those tributaries. And somebody else, there was a farm, and the horses and cows were, or whichever animal was, like 10 feet from the river. So, you know, to try to work with the owner to keep them a little bit further away so you didn't have that definite runoff.
Right.
So, and we took pictures of the different sites as we went down so that they had documentation on site pictures. I mean, you
Okay.
could put it on some type of aerial map, you know, here you have this or whatever. But
Sure.
we did it all on the ground.
Sure. Donna, that's a great idea. That is a super idea. I know we haven't done it for our entire area that we work on. What we have done is regular aerial. There's pilots that have donated their time to take us up and film or take pictures of and film when we've had the like in 2018 when we had the huge blue-green algae bloom here, and we went up to Lake Okeechobee and then photographed the areas of the bloom there, and then followed it down the Calusa River and into Cape Coral, and you know we're mapping out the areas that where it was the worst, and eventually ended up being bad almost everywhere. But the idea of taking the pictures of what could potentially be sources of the actual pollution, I think is a wonderful idea. I know some of our rangers do take pictures when there's a problem, when they spot a problem, they're taking pictures of that, and we're submitting that with our data reports, but not going out and just doing pictures of what could be possible sources, I think is a terrific idea. And I will definitely take that idea back to our ranger crew. We call our volunteers out there in the field the Waterkeeper Rangers, and I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah, I think it may also help to pinpoint if you have E. coli higher in this area, where right above that area maybe.
I agree.
Dumping. Yeah.
Okay, Donna, thank you.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your participation, Donna. If there's anyone else interested in asking a question? Okay, looks like that's it. So thank you again, Ruth. Stick with us.
Sure.
We aren't going to be too much longer, but I really do appreciate you sharing your views and understanding and insights with us, and hopefully things can start to move a little quicker to make the kinds of changes we make. And I'll be talking a little bit about that momentarily.
Okay.
So let me go on and talk a little bit about the executive management team and some of the activities that are taking place in the ECCL. Do it quickly. We named Alan Bowditch of Shadowwood to be our Chief Communications Officer. What a find, what a find. This man is terrific and is going to be doing significant things for us and helping us as we go along. He is looking for people that have communications backgrounds to work with him on the communications committee. So if any of you are listening here, or even those of you who view this as a recording, reach out to me or just go on to the ECCL's website, esterotoday.com, look under About Us and Organization, and then you'll see everybody there and if you click their images, you'll get their email address, and you can contact any of us and let us know that you have an interest. Next is the ECCL board is fairly new. It's been reconfigured over the last year. We have 9 players now that are board members who have volunteered to help us as we move forward with the ECCL. And they're going to have a workshop tomorrow morning at Lee Health, Coconut Point. It is not open to the public, but I raise it because the board and management needs to come to terms and get a little synergetic in terms of what our roles are and how we move forward with activities, advocacies, and so on. So I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a 3-hour session. And that leads me right into Don Eslick. Many of you know Don, some of you may not, but Don Eslick had an event, a healthcare event several weeks ago. It was serious, but he's doing okay. He went through the hospital session, was released to a rehab organization right up on Williams Road in 41, spent about a week there, and now he's home and he's doing okay. I spoke to him the other day, and he is grateful for all of the folks who are reaching out to him And if you have a desire to do so, please give him a call, send him an email. He can respond, and he's doing okay. The final thing, or next to final thing I want to talk about, which is tied to what Ruth has been talking about, and it's called the Southwest Florida Regional Resilience Compact. Now, the Southwest Florida Regional Resilience Compact is an organization that is being promoted by Growing Climate Solutions, the Path to Positive Change, and they are supporting this compact. The village and ECCL are members of the Growing Climate Solutions. The compact is simply an agreement between county and municipal governments in Southwest Florida, similar to what they did on the East Coast, to collaboratively identify, prepare for, adapt to, and mitigate climate change impacts. Compact will address issues like sea level rise, water quality, harmful algae blooms, erosion, greenhouse gas emissions, heat events, droughts, flooding, and intensive hurricanes. That's quite a spread of things.
Yeah.
But that's what they're going to be doing. It will also improve Southwest Florida's position to apply for federal funding and grants to secure the necessary resources to move climate solutions forward and to advocate for responsive state and federal legislation. Now, Sanibel is the first municipality out of Charlotte, Lee, and Collier counties and their respective municipalities to signal their commitment already. For this regional approach to be successful, however, it's imperative that Lee County and local cities' elected leaders swiftly join this compact by adopting a forthcoming memo of understanding that will be coming to them. We strongly encourage the Village of Estero and Lee County officials to sign this MOU, Memo of Understanding, and join this enlightened group of municipalities supporting the formation of this compact. This is really important, and the ECCL is committed to environmental issues. Those of you who are familiar with the ECCL understand that we have an environmental council, now chaired by Dr. Joseph Maselli. We're really getting more and more into this, but our objective is to create coalitions, not to simply take the ECCL and be the sole voice in a wind. This is not going to be as effective as developing and reaching out to other nonprofits to enter into reciprocal memberships. And what that simply means is that the ECCL and the nonprofit will waive current membership dues. And we just become members of each organizations and we waive that. The approach is really designed to form coalitions, to learn, to support and expand the ECCL's presence in civic and environmental organizations. I mean, we see this as really quite a value. You know, we have a current database of emails that is quite extensive. But if we can come together with other organizations who have the same type of mission, have civic responsibilities in a variety of different areas, our voice gets louder exponentially, and so does theirs. So I think we'll be moving in that direction as much as we possibly can. I want to share that with members, and we'll keep you informed about that as we move forward. On that note, well, let me ask, are there any questions from anyone on what I've just talked about? Yes, okay, Frank Moser. Okay, Frank, you're on. Frank? Frank?
He's still muted.
I'm unmuted, I think.
Okay,
Yes.
there you go. There you go, Frank. You're on. Go ahead. Frank?
A brief comment and then a question. Ruth has done an outstanding job, and I just want to thank her. It was an inspiring message that you communicated there, and I thank you for that.
Welcome.
My question, though, is how many people are in the audience, and how many people have heard Ruth that you will all hear this morning?
It's roughly about 30 folks are now lined up here, and when we run it again, we'll show the recording and what the experience has been since, I guess, April. It's usually several hundred people, up to 350 people get online and listen to this.
Thank you.
Okay, Frank, thanks very much. We appreciate it. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and Mark's going to talk a little bit about some of our council activities. Mark, you're on.
Thanks, Jim. You know, even with COVID-19, we're meeting virtually on Zoom, Google Meet, and sometimes we meet in person. So the executive management team met with the Village of Estero to discuss the strategy for the distribution of the CARES Act funding. And we're honored and proud and I guess a little bit of pride that we get asked to how should we spend that kind of money. We've also been participating in the survey that the village is putting on, and many others have also, the outreach survey on the use of the recently purchased 62 acres. What do we want to do with that? How do we want to see it? Both recreation and development. The Culture and Recreation Council, they're starting up again. We're looking at some things. During that outreach survey, we asked about a community center, an auditorium, a theater. You know, how can we use that to enhance the life in Estero? They've also got a committee that's working on a veterans recognition or veterans memorial pocket park with the 7 flags. Judy Hammond's the lead on that. If you want to join that committee, there's some information on the website. The Community Development Committee, Anthony's working a community database for the Village of Estero. You know, how is Bellaterra different than Stony Brook, different than Grandasia, different than Shadowwood? You know, do you want an area that has a lot of activities for kids, or are you looking more for pickleball? So the village gets a lot of questions, so we're helping them put some things together on that. On education, we sent out a request last month for donations, and Victoria Risco and Robin Edish donated supplies and money, and Sally Watts, Stacy Hansen, and the culinary team at Grandasia provided lunch for the staff at the Pinewoods Elementary. You know, we're the community stepping up. We really appreciate that. And Jill Letty also made a monetary contribution.
One more, Mark, let me stop you. One more, Sally Riccardelli. She also, from the Michigan Lake Credit Union, they gave gift certificates to all the teachers in Estero. A really nice move.
Right. So you know, that's what we're all about. Education equates to jobs, or equates to the values of housing, to a better community, to a better quality of life. So the other thing the Education Council is working on is how do we re-engage with junior achievement in the schools? And junior achievement's reaching out right now. I'm actually a junior achievement volunteer to some of the Estero ambassadors. You know, how do we get back into the schools virtually? And specifically, they're looking at one of the middle schools. Environmental, we had a conversation. Joe and Joe Pavich Sr. are working, you know, the septic systems in Estero. We have over 400 of them. We have over 100,000 in Lee County. We're trying to put some metrics together as how do we go about cleaning them, repairing them, eliminating them if they need to, converting to sewer. That's going to take a little while to put that together, and we want to go for the greater Estero area because a lot of as Ruth said easily, everything flows into the Estero Bay. So it can't just be the Estero River. There's other rivers we're working on. Jim talked about the partnerships. We're trying to get, you know, think about it. If we've got 10,000 emails that we send out and all these other partners send out, and maybe we could organize 50,000 people, we can really make a difference. We talked about that. The health council's meeting, Chief talked about that, I think, a little bit. We're meeting with the defibrillators and other things. Obviously, some of that's in person, social distancing, some of that's over Zoom. We're meeting with both San Carlos and Estero Fire Rescue. We're trying to get the Veterans Mental Health Coalition back together. We had a date set up in March and then COVID hit. So we're trying to do something. November's Veterans Day. We're trying to make that happen. Mary Jo McLaughlin's working and with myself and Jim. They do have a committee in the Health Council, which promotes family and youth wellness, and they need some members. So again, we're not trying to do just the over 60 crowd. We're trying to do the whole community in things. Transportation, we had a meeting with Lee County Commissioner Pendergrass on the extension of Alico Road all the way to 82. We think that'll keep some trucks off of Corkscrew Road, but we're also concerned about the environmental impact. So a lot of things we do on the councils, we do together. Nothing's kind of independent. So where that curve is on Alico Road is kind of the headwaters of the Estero River. So if we put in a road, we got to watch the runoff that Ruth talked about and the trucks and everything else. So we're trying to make how that's all going to happen. We've also been involved in the Lee County Transportation Improvement Plan to see, even though it might not be specifically in the village of Estero, it'll affect the village of Estero or affect the greater Estero area. And that's all I got today, Jim. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mark. I appreciate that. Is anybody in the participating have any questions for Mark? Okay. Thanks again, Mark. Let me just briefly walk you through the August financial report for the ECCL. John Quinn couldn't make it today. The income for the month of August was $2,890. Year-to-date income was $36,505, which is about $2,844 better than the budget. Spending was lower than the budget for the month and $3,900 lower year-to-date. The ECCL Advocacy Foundation income for the month was $309, and the current funds available are $12,941. Those of you listening may remember we started the Advocacy Foundation back around June of last year, and it's slowly building up, but we really need more than that. We need to have people, when you visit the website, you always have the opportunity to donate some money to us. Basically, the money will be used to build somewhat of a war chest for the ECCL, so when that issues do surface and that we need resources that call for dollars and resources, they're there. We know that whenever we come across issues that are going to harm the quality of life in Estero, the people that are pushing the issues usually have an abundance of cash to make their statements known and their position made. We do not. We need to build that up. Fortunately, today, I have to just say today, in addition to 309 for August, yesterday we got a donation of $500 from an individual in Estero. I mean, that's pretty good. We'll take anything, and it can be sustained. You can in fact just give us $5, $10, $15, $25. You can do that monthly. It's not that much when you think about it. So if you have a love for Estero and surrounding communities, think about helping us out as we move forward with the Estero Forever Foundation. Okay, are there any other questions out there about anything that's on your mind? Now's a chance to verbalize it. Yes, Ruth.
Jim, do you have a newsletter that goes out that I could sign up for, or Waterkeeper could sign up for, or just so I can stay on top of some of these projects you've been talking about?
Good question. I'll get to Frank. Frank, you can hear me. I'll get to you. I'm not going to forget you. Yes, if you go to esterotoday.com, almost on any page, you can put your email address in, and they will send you. You will then get all the emails that we send out, which includes a community report, the Greater Estero Community Report. It is generally a quarterly one, but you'll get all kinds of information, the kinds of issues we talked about here, plus many, many others that helps people understand what's happening from a civic perspective in Estero and surrounding communities. So yeah, that's an easy way to do it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Frank, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you. Although I do appreciate the opportunity to speak once again, I must have hit the request button by mistake, so forgive me. It is a very good meeting, and I thank you all again. Bye.
Oh, okay, Frank, thank you. I want to finally wrap up the meeting. Hey, it's about a minute to go for an hour, not too bad. I really want to thank Chief Vanderbrook and Ruth Watkins. They've given us some really good, insightful information that hopefully we can take some action on. I think, again, it's really to our advantage, the ECCL and the Calusa Waterkeepers and others will start to come together now and coalesce into a group that can, in fact, through increasing the volume of people and the noise level, make things happen much quicker than perhaps they've been moving in the past. On that note, we're planning our next meeting for October 9th at 10 a.m., likely going to be a Zoom meeting. Thank you again for joining us, and please stay safe as I end the meeting. Thank you again.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jim.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
You're welcome.